Welcome, everyone. So excited for another episode. And today we have Dr. Katie Raher, who is the founder and CEO of Constant Love and Learning and an award-winning teacher turned school psychologist who helps soul-led educators and change makers cultivate well-being and social emotional learning within themselves, the children they serve, and their larger systems so they can sustainably create impact while honoring their health, happiness, and wholeness. After her own autoimmune diseases and anxiety led to a physical and mental health crash and burn in 2016, an evidence-based and intuitive journey back to well-being, Dr. Raher discovered that well-being practices that nourish the whole educator, social, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, and professional, are the foundation of being able to effectively support children's resilience and learning, and thus the most important kind of professional development there is. Since starting Constant Love and Learning in 2019, she has supported thousands of educators from across the globe through her educator well-being programs, social emotional learning workshops, consulting and coaching, and fun and simple handouts. She's also married to a high school math teacher, mom to two highly sensitive kids who are her greatest teachers, a Brene Brown groupie, and a big fan of dance parties in the kitchen or pretty much anywhere. Thank you so much for being with us today, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Well, we are kicking off with one of the most important questions. I don't know about you, always looking, what is the most important thing to be watching right now in TV? So, what is your favorite TV show that you're watching right now?
I had some dilemma about this, and what I came to was just it's Grey's Anatomy right now. It's back for another season, and I actually didn't watch it for about 10 years
Okay.
while my kids were little. And my 13-year-old, who wants to be a doctor when she grows up, I reintroduced Grey's Anatomy to myself and with her, and it's really like supported us in building our relationship. And the new intern crew feels like the original part of the
Oh,
series, which is pretty amazing. And as I was thinking about it, one of the best parts about it is it actually kicked off in my life when I started grad school, my school psychologist program. So I was introduced to the program in the second season, and me and my school psych cohort, we would watch it together all the time. So it feels like a little bit full circle for me that seems to be back where I am. There's a ton of other shows that I love. The other one that I probably would say that I recently finished that I did not watch when it was in its prime would be Jane the Virgin. That's been a personal favorite. Love that one as well. Yeah.
very nice. Yeah, I was on board at the beginning of Grey's Anatomy and then I stepped away from it. I've been interested because I don't know about you, I love anything that has so many seasons, right? So I get frustrated sometimes when I'm like, oh, there's only 10 episodes, like I'm in it. So I might
Mm-hmm.
have to go back and do a rewatch as well.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a while. That's 20th season, the longest running show or something like that. My
Oh
daughter
my
is
goodness.
loves it so much that she tells me all the trivia behind it. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, in one sentence, how would your colleagues describe you as a school psychologist?
So, on this question, you did share this question for me in advance. I want to share with everyone that I reflected on this and I also just went to my colleagues and told them I was going to be on this amazing podcast and that I would love to know what they thought of me as well. And I wanted to say, before I'll tell you about me, what they reflected back, I think every single person out there listening should literally go ask their colleagues this question because I got to tell you, it filled my bucket in all the most beautiful ways because we have such full schedules. And yes, we connect in lots of ways with our colleagues. And sometimes we get those thank yous from one another. Often, though, we don't get a chance to have this kind of reflection back to each other. So I would just let everyone know if you could go do this, it literally is a bucket filler. And me and my colleagues were on a text stream. I said, we got to do this for everyone. We're going to take turns filling each other's buckets with this. So, anyhow, they would describe me as a supportive, dedicated, approachable, knowledgeable, relationship focused school psychologist who makes sure that every person feels like they matter when I have my interactions with them. And, some other things they do sometimes describe me as is the well-being lady, the Komochi's lady, the early childhood school psych. So I have a variety of other terms. Yeah.
That are some lovely, lovely adjectives.
I got all filled up. Yeah.
And I love how you guys have decided to continue this with one another. That
Mhm.
is incredible because I know so often we're kind of feeling like we're living in a silo. We have this wonderful group of people that we
Yep.
do constantly interact with, but like you mentioned, other than thanks for having my back, or rarely do we really focus our attention on some of these really great positives. So that's
Mhm.
incredible.
Yeah. It was a fun activity. So thank you.
Well, how long have you been a school psychologist, and at what point in your journey did you become interested in or kind of focus more on the social emotional side?
So I got my credential about 14 years ago, and my PhD program was quite long. So, was doing lots of school psych work for a good 4 or 5 years before that. And I started to get really interested in social emotional learning once I was credentialed and in my role. I should mention that as a school psychologist, once I was in practice, I was originally grant funded in a very prevention focused role. So my entire role was with Gen Ed doing consultation pretty much
Wow.
and direct service in the classroom. So tier 1, tier 2 was really that was my primary initial role, which was pretty amazing. It did come out of some of the work that I had been advocating for in my internship. I was able to be hired on in that district, from where I'd interned. And my research through grad school was really focused more on literacy, prevention of reading difficulties, things of that nature, and also the teacher side of that work. And when I got into classrooms more consistently and doing lots of consultation with staff, it became so evident that when teachers were consulting with me, which was almost 100% on behavior, that we needed some more prevention oriented supports in the classroom. And at the time, so I'm dating myself, I already told you the number, but at the time, the term social emotional learning wasn't even really much of a thing.
Right.
And it was just sort of starting to be dropped. Like seeds were planting in terms of that. And it wasn't that when I was in grad school, I didn't study models of what we would call social emotional learning now. There were definitely interventions in the social emotional realm, but we didn't call it that per se back then. And so, sort of as I was wrapping up towards that, I was credentialed, getting that dissertation finalized, all that stuff, was when the term was becoming more common. And so that was where I would say I started to be really passionate about it, because I was like, we got to get these tier 1 supports in place. And so I was exploring social emotional learning curriculum. So I tried a few and kind of brought things into the classrooms I was supporting, with me providing the direct lessons of those SEL supports. And then over time, we kind of transitioned into teachers often being the direct leaders, with me coaching, modeling, and also supporting. I was able then to have more time to support at those higher levels of intense need. So that was really kind of where it started, because in consulting with teachers and just realizing in those collaborative conversations that was the need. Like targeting just one kid in support wasn't the answer. That kid needed SEL, and the whole class could support from those peer-based interactions of expanding their social emotional competence. And I will say I did have a little bit of interest, I guess probably always under the surface around this, because in college I did one of my thesis some of my thesis work around emotional intelligence in adults.
Okay.
So there is definitely that tie there, and there's so much overlap in what we call emotional intelligence and social emotional learning, and there's some slight variations. But I at the time hadn't done it in relation to education. I wasn't entirely sure I even wanted to be in education when I left college. Well, towards the end of college. By the end of college, I did know I wanted to work in education. And so I think things just continued to fuse for me. And then in terms of my interest in adult SEL, which is a big passion of mine as well, that really didn't come to be until I got really sick in 2016. And that experience led me to do a lot of inner work, for me to build a lot of awareness. And it wasn't that I would actually describe myself as a pretty emotionally intelligent person all along, but when I was consulting or supporting even directly with these SEL curriculum, and whatnot with the kids, I don't think I realized at the time how critical the adult SEL piece was. So even in consultation, the questions I would ask to reflect with my staff I was supporting, I was still getting them to build awareness around the kid and the environment and things like that, but I didn't dive into the adult's nervous system, the adult's own awareness and social awareness to some extent around the kid, but I didn't dive into that as much. And so that became more of a passion of mine once I realized how much it mattered in my own interactions with others. Like, my interactions with others have significantly improved since doing my own inner work in lots of ways. And then when I started to integrate more of that piece into my consultation with staff, I realized how impactful it was on their capacity to, in real time, do a lot of the interventions that we had co-created with, around kids. Because a lot of times otherwise they would come back to me like, well, that didn't work because da da da, but I hadn't gotten to the real, real underlying reasons why things weren't working. It was because they had been so triggered, and all the things that we had, connected about when they were regulated and calm with me in consultation, sometimes they couldn't tap into in real time with that kid when things got a little wonky in the classroom. So that's kind of where my journey with SEL, how it kind of came to be. Yeah.
That's so incredible. I think it's so incredible that you had such this unique position, right? Most
Mm-hmm.
school psychologists do not start off working in general education tier 1, tier 2.
Mm-hmm.
Why has this been so important for you to continue to do this, and all the different roles you have had since that time?
I will say I have always had a big passion for the prevention so that we can reach more kids. So we're not living in crisis mode and putting out fires. Rather, we are looking upstream to fix and resolve what those foundational pieces are so we can serve more effectively with the time and resources that we do have. I will say my program at UC Berkeley was a very prevention focused model. So their goal really was for their psychologists to lead and have a huge focus on gen ed as a prevention. And at the time we weren't talking about MTSS back then. At the time we were just talking about RTI.
Right.
And ultimately still that is the goal. And for me, I love when we can do this prevention focused work. For me, it just fills me up more, because then I'm able to create classrooms, gen ed classrooms, that are more effective for the kids being served. We get more impact on them on so many levels, socially, emotionally, academically. And the kids who do need that more intensive support, they have peer models who are more empathic, who are able to more effectively even model and teach, sometimes directly, those tools to to kids who have more significant needs. And I find that while it can be tricky, teachers can definitely feel the stress of having sometimes feeling like, oh, I've got to be all the things. It's not just, I'm not just there to teach academics. There's the social emotional side things too. And there's kids with disabilities and all these things. But I find that people do feel more fulfilled when we have a model where that looks like this. And I think when I talk to teachers, even about sometimes with the role that I've done as a school psychologist, they always tell me like, that sounds amazing. I wish I had a school psychologist who could come do, like people who I don't work with in this capacity, but through my educator wellness stuff. I wish I had school psychologists who could come consult with me on a regular basis. Like, I think they're craving that. And I believe that we can, even when things are very swamped, and even in my role right now where there's a little bit more of that traditional piece, I'm very part-time right now as a school psych in schools, but even when there is that traditional piece, we can still continue to advocate for our capacity to do this. School, I mean, there's plenty of amazing people in schools, right? In our shared capacity, school counselors, school social workers, school therapists, and a variety of other roles. School psychologists, though, of course, as one and speaking to one and speaking to all of you listening, I think are the most uniquely and most equipped, like just most uniquely and most equipped professionals to do this kind of work and advocate for it. We have more training years, no matter where, if you got a PhD or an EDS or whatever, we have more years of training than like any other school-based professionals, and we can pretty much do it all pretty much. And if we didn't learn something, we can go learn it. Like we're learners. And so ultimately I find the biggest impact in this. And I think that when we can transition from, right now, so many schools, the tier 3 is, there's an inverse triangle when we think about that. Pyramid is often upside down in our schools. And when we can shift it, it's just so much more effective. And I even think sometimes when I talk to parents and they're upset about not having enough services and trying to advocate, I'm like, but what if we just got all kids these services? What if we, so, and this wasn't something you had to fight for through an IEP, but this was just the norm. And school psychs and other professionals could be doing this tier 1 prevention based work through that social emotional learning work, through that kind of consultative role, and all those kind of creative preventative things. So I just think it's how we get our most bang for our buck, really. So super passionate about it. Definitely most people will describe me as the prevention lady who's always advocating for that piece. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, how did you get from that piece in that consultation role to end up creating your Constant Love and Learning group? And I'm curious how you are wording some of this, because we know, like with the pandemic, the term like self-care almost became like a bad word,
Yep.
right? And it's so hard. I mean, that's what we're part of what we're talking about. So how did this transition to this, and how do you talk about it so that people aren't, oh, I need to go take a bubble bath, or go
Yeah.
take a deep breath, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah. And I appreciate this question because I am always trying to be very mindful of my language. And I think that's true as school psychologists in general. If we can phrase things a certain way, we will have more receptivity to what we say and we're advocating for. I originally called what I did self-care, and I did capitalize the SEL in self because to me, it's never been about just bubble baths or massages, and actually very much rarely is that. It was more about the whole educator, the whole holistic view of our wellness, honoring all those pieces, our awareness, but also our physical health, our spiritual well-being. And by that, I mean very broad, not per se religion, and all the different pieces of us. And yes, it became sort of a toxic word, and people would roll their eyes. And still to this day, sometimes people will roll their eyes, but sometimes I will work with organizations who love that term. And so then I will use that term, and that's okay. I generally do use the word well-being and wellness. And people are generally more open to those terms. I will say that when I do use the word self-care still, because I do believe we do need to look within, I always frame it in connection to collective care, because it's not just about what individuals do. It's also about our schools and our organizations' capacity to take care of one another and to make sure, just like when we think about tier one and system supports for kids, our pyramid is reversed when we think of wellness for educators. We're often saying you have to do all this on your own. And I do think there is a vital piece of that. And I even tell people we ultimately, each of us need to think about our IWP, which is like our individualized well-being plan rather than just an IEP, right? We get to figure out what works for us in terms of our well-being. And we're not ever meant to do this by ourselves. And so it's not about you have to go make sure you do work to take care of yourself. We also have to create schools and staff cultures and climates where people feel taken care of. And yes, sometimes my cup is totally filled and I can do all sorts of taking care of others, the other adults, the other kids. And sometimes life throws me curveballs, as it does. It could be I accidentally overscheduled myself. It could be 3 different IEPs had to get rescheduled and it's all in the same week. It could be, our same day. It could be that, so as anyone who has an autoimmune disease know, no matter how much you put it into remission, as I have, sometimes things unfold and you have a couple bad nights of sleep. You have a day with however many IEPs or whatever it is, and you can go get a flare. And then I'm feeling not my best, even though I'm still maintaining all of my own individualized well-being plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I, in those moments, need my team around me to support me. I am hopeful that I'm in a system that honors that. I have the good fortune of my school I work at right now, where it is a beautiful staff culture. Our principal he's gonna get county of principal of the county, whatever award that is. It's like teacher of the year, but then he's moved up to the county, he's principal. He is so supportive. Our school is very family first, health first.
Wow.
Everybody is so kind. We have this beautiful committee that takes care and supports. So we do have that. So I feel like I always have that. I'm very grateful for that. And was able to advocate for additional supports in my school. So they work in tandem. And so while I believe we all should have an IWP, kids don't have an IEP that they're supposed to implement on their own. They have an IEP team. So
Right.
we all need that IWP team of people cheering us on. And ultimately, while there's that, I believe there's individual sort of wellness, there's that collective care piece of wellness where we take care of each other. And then there's the system shifts. And so we ideally have schools where people don't have to recover from them.
Right.
And that's often not the case. We go home and feel like we have to recover. And ultimately, of course, in our interactions with children who have varying degrees of needs, even typically developing, they're children. They're going to have big feelings. They're going to dysregulate sometimes. So we're going to have those stressors in our days. And yes, we're going to need to tap into tools to help ourselves regulate again and again so we can keep showing up for those kids in our care as our best selves. And it's sort of this package. So but I also do believe in order to create collective care and system care and shifts in our systems with regards to wellness, we do have to have that responsibility of our own inner work and honoring our needs. When I was at my deepest, darkest days, I was beyond not regulated. No matter what I knew in terms of knowledge, I was yelling at my own kids all the time. I was snippy. I wasn't creative. Like I couldn't even support in the ways that my, knowledge base potentially could have offered, or supported me with. And so, yeah, so that's kind of the terms I use. But I do always kind of follow the lead of the people in whoever I'm working with and see where we go from there. Yeah.
And how did that lead to you creating the Constant Love and Learning group?
Yes, thank you. So, as I've started to integrate the adult SEL piece into my work, that was just something I just continued to have sort of intuitive hits around, like, oh, this really seems to be a big thing, and this seems to be the vital piece of the puzzle. Simultaneous to that, I was also, I didn't mention, but one of the SEL curriculums that I ended up loving and always integrating was kimochis. Kimochis means feelings in Japanese and is my absolute favorite SEL curriculum. And so I was also asked to become a trainer for them when, as things continue to evolve in my work, because I had done so much work piloting their curriculum in my school district and whatnot. And I just kept getting a lot of calls to go out into the world and support in some of the ways that I wanted to, that sometimes felt like being within a school system wasn't always possible. And
Yeah.
you know, one of my colleagues once said, "You're such a visionary. You always are thinking outside the box and pushing boundaries in school districts. And you always have, not always, but sometimes there's pushback." And
Yeah.
he said, "You should just start a company to do the things you do." So I said, "Huh, okay." And so then I decided, let me put this into an organization where we're doing this SEL work, this adult SEL work. And then that kind of continued to evolve and integrated more and more on that wellness side of things for adults. And I really just integrate everything I spent a small fortune learning into what I support educators in learning in terms of their wellness and SEL. And I continue to always grow and learn on my own, so I can continue to bring sort of the most cutting edge supports to folks. And so with Constant Love and Learning, we're really on a mission to create that equitable education ecosystem, which that's why I got into education, by nurturing healthy, whole, empowered educators, school psychs, and all the other, I consider school psychs educators. And by doing so, creating educators who are able to tap into the resilience and potential of every child in their most effective way. And so we really envision a world where every educator feels well, feels connected, honored, impactful, and fulfilled. And as part of Constant Love and Learning, we create and offer really heart-centered experiences and workshops and supports so educators can feel their best and show
Mhm.
up as their best. Really, as I like to say, one feeling, one breath, one connection at a time. So that's kind of what we're all about. Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, what have you noticed in regards to the impact of your work and with the Constant Love and Learning group that you have created when you think about the impact on these educators outside of your, just single school site or single school district? Where have you seen this impact for the other educators and the students that they serve?
Yeah, I love to see the ripple effects of the work. I get so many beautiful stories about people's wins in their classrooms, and I would also say in their homes. So, a beautiful, I don't know if you want to say side effect, because I did anticipate it per se, even though my thoughts are always around how can I support educators to make this impact on the classrooms. I get a lot of feedback. Oh my goodness, these strategies worked so beautifully with these kids. And this kid who I didn't even think was ever gonna do XYZ now does all these, is doing these things. And oh my gosh, I was so stressed all the time because these things were happening with behaviors, and now kids are using their emotional language. And so when it's that direct teaching of kids, I get all these beautiful stories. And a lot of people tell me, even for those direct SEL tools I'm teaching, oh my gosh, I do these with my kids at home too. And it's amazing. Like my own kids are learning all these things. And people tell me how much, when they are taken care of and their nervous system feels regulated and and they've built a lot of awareness because a lot of my work, yes, we're regulating nervous systems and reducing stress, but so much of my work is I'm trying to build awareness within folks so that we, in that becoming aware of our patterns and then choosing how to respond to those patterns if we want to shift things. Well, one thing I get a comment on a lot is this is cheaper than therapy and better than therapy. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm therapy. And oh my gosh, it's made such a difference. Like I have such a better relationship with my own kids. I'm seeing so much better impact with them. Oh my gosh, I'm actually enjoying my job now because I show up differently
Mhm.
because I'm not stressed out all the time, or I have compassion for myself when I do make mistakes, and then I notice that I'm able to have compassion for the kids more effectively. And another interesting thing I will say that I love to see is that some of the awareness that people build within themselves about themselves, and they'll reflect on, wow, I guess this can't, a lot of that sort of therapeutic work. I can't believe I've been thinking this way about myself, or I've been reacting this way since I was a kid. And they get curious about where that patterning came from. And schools is one of the ways that our patterns very much develop. And they often develop insights into, is this even the pattern I want to be passing down? Is this how I want to manage my classroom? Is this the messaging I want to be passing down to kids? And I love to see the beautiful shifts. And I always say there's no right or wrong, right? We get to figure out what we find is in alignment with our values. But I love watching that because it's not just sort of in those interactions that I think the regulated nervous systems and more equipped, tool-based supports allow them to make that just in, teaching kids in different ways. It's literally like just a full-blown shift in, I can't think of the word, but it's just a big shift in terms of mindset, in terms of what are the values we want to even pass down to kids. And
Mhm.
and I see that in my own experience of my own work, that sometimes things will literally come out of my mouth and I think, oh my gosh, that just came out of my mouth. And it makes sense in the context of my self-talk and what I've been trained to think. And I'm like, no, that is actually not something I want to be teaching kids. For example, suck it up, push through, like some of these things that we say to kids. I don't know that I've ever said suck it up to a kid in a context of a classroom or an SEL lesson, but like
Right.
sometimes we see kids, it's like, well, you've got this. It's okay. We're going to push through. And I'm like, is that what I want to do? Or is it, I want to empower them that it's okay to take a break. It's
Right.
okay to rest. It's okay to say no, to set a boundary. It's like all these things that I had been conditioned to believe as what was good, quote
Right.
unquote. I'm like, getting curious around, is that the messaging I actually want to pass down? And ultimately, so much of the work we do at Constant Love and Learning is about honoring humanity. And I think that is such a shift that I see in the educators I support. And very much I see the ripple effects on students.
Well, and as you were sharing that, it made me think about how I'm modeling that, right, to the other people that I work with and
Yeah.
modeling that to the other people in my life. How often am I just like, no, we're just pushing through. Like
Yeah,
we're going to get this done. It's okay. Or how often are we like, oh, I'm just getting through this week, and how frequently is the next thought in my head, is that what I really want to be saying to myself, much less out loud to other people in my
yeah,
immediate vicinity? Because for a lot of us, especially working in education, that could be every week.
totally.
I'm just trying to make it through. I'm just trying to make it through. And how often are we just like, when am I going to switch that? and actually, I don't know, enjoy Monday through Friday and not just have to wait till I get home to recover
Yep.
from the rest of my day and all those different pieces. It's really interesting how often I'm finding myself questioning, like you mentioned, something coming out of my mouth or even something I'm saying inside my head.
Absolutely. And I think what you're speaking to too, that some of this work isn't just the ripple effects aren't just on the kids, they're on colleagues around us, they're on our, our own families. Some people will ask me, well, I'm like the only person in my school who's interested in wellness. Nobody else is. That's okay. You go first. See the shifts that happen. And in that shift in your modeling and your interactions, and just even your potentially different posing of questions in meetings, that will get people starting to be curious about it. So some people
Right.
just, they're sometimes just not ready to do some of the work that I do, and that's okay. But I see myself as planting seeds, and each of us can plant seeds. So our meetings can shift to maybe being more wellness oriented. Our
Mhm.
our demands within our schools can shift. I'm always asking questions. Is that something that really has to get done, or what could we take off our team's plates?
Mhm.
And that only happens in part because I'm trying to always get curious about with myself. And I'm not trying to say I am some saint who magically always does wellness. I also fall right back into old patterns because for, almost 40 years of my life, I lived in those patterns, not
Right.
just as an adult, but I was a very, I would say I was a child who had very high functioning anxiety, who was very high achieving, like most school psychologists, probably.
Yes.
Not all of us, but, any of us type A folks. And it's really easy to fall back. But then if I've planted seeds, there's other people around me in my community. I've created a IWP team who can then be like, hey, Katie, I see you going down that path again.
Right.
And I've created enough structure in my life. Like, I like to make sure I have specific, not only do I lead a lot of things with wellness, but I attend a lot of things so that I have sort of these anchors to come back to myself. Like, is the
Mhm.
way I'm living actually in alignment with how I want to live, currently? Or am I falling back on these old patterns? And then having compassion for myself when I do, and for all
Right.
of you, because we're all just doing the best we can, and all those patterns served a purpose. We're all
Mhm.
here because we did a lot of pushing through, and not, and we get to reclaim and choose a different path. And just because we did that doesn't mean we have to. Like, for example, at my school psych program in grad school was particularly challenging in terms of the demands, and they've done a lot of shifting. And I found myself, when I found out that they have much easier requirements, no, by no means easy, but relative to what we had, there was this one little voice in me that said, oh my gosh, that's not fair. Like, how do they get
Right.
off easy? Like, as though I wanted them to suffer just like I did. But then the
Mhm.
other part, my more attuned self was like, oh, I see that pattern popping up. Of course, that's how you felt. And isn't it so beautiful that things have shifted and are starting to shift? And celebrating that. So just saying, want to name it that I'm no saint in this. I'm right there with all of you, as always on the journey. Yeah.
Well, and I think about, just some little things that people can do, right, to start this off. Most people do not get to, unfortunately, what you had to get to, which was a really big health issue for yourself. But, hopefully are having some self-awareness that, yes, for many of us, we have extremely amazing work ethic. That's how we got to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that's how we have to choose every single day how we're going to be living our life. I think about something as easy as, like, I worked with a director who had an idea about how long we were allowed to be in meetings for. Some of us have been in IEP meetings that are like hours
Totally.
long. And, I always had that moment where I'm like, we've been sitting here for 90 minutes. Like, I need, even if I didn't, I need a break because
Mm-hmm.
I think we should not be in a meeting longer than 90 minutes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let's all take a break here, everyone, and just take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other actionable steps that you think for people who want to? I can't imagine anyone listening to this or like, no, I am the saint. I am perfect at this. Like, it's just one of those things we're constantly working on,
Yeah.
improving our report writing, improving our own well being, improving the well being, at our school sites, and really getting that team that's surrounding us. What do you think are some actionable steps that people can take?
Definitely requesting breaks as needed, and everyone there will be grateful in so many ways too. Also, stepping into honoring your needs when you're at meetings. I find that people go and then continue to bypass, like, oh, well, I'm not going to eat here because I don't want to eat in front of everyone, be rude. How many other people there are hungry and want to be eating too? Like, let's all eat. I mean, some places very much do have eating, but some places people will. I get these comments a lot from folks. Also, I would two things I'll say in terms of languaging and mindset thing. One, start to notice how much we apologize for honoring our needs, and
Mm,
even for things that we've done nothing wrong. Can't even tell you how many emails I get. I'm so sorry I didn't this. I'm so sorry I was sick and had to take the day off. I'm really glad you took the day off, and or I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you within 3 hours. It's okay. And even so, first of all, just noticing how much you're apologizing for things you have no need to apologize for. We all deserve to be unapologetic about really honoring humanity. And when we do that, to shift into a gratitude state, right? Like, thank you for your patience with this.
mhm.
Take the 3 days if you've got to, and then thanks for patience. If they know you're going to get back to you, I mean, if you're, don't be someone who doesn't respond for weeks and weeks, and like within reason, right? Another big one is my favorite mantra I try to live by as a perfectionist in recovery is done is better than perfect. So I
Mhm.
will find myself, I'm writing a report, I'm like, okay, I gotta do this, da, 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 da. And then sometimes I'm like, do I need to do that? If I've got my legally defensible baseline here, do I need to make this perfect? No. I do not need to spend another hour making every last thing. Unfortunately, the bottom line is reports aren't read that much anyhow, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, or fortunately.
And
Yeah.
I know that my being centered and reporting out in a way that connects with the family and the educator on the team and educators on the IEP team is going to be a more effective use of my time and energy than
Mhm.
trying to kill myself for another hour. So done is better than perfect. It's my mantra to live by. One other big thing that I love, and my school is pretty good about this. When you think about setting boundaries, don't just think about your own, think about school-wide boundaries. What are the boundaries that we
Mm.
all can have? So, what are the expectations around when people respond to emails and expectations around that? That will take a lot of stress off. If I think someone expects me to respond at 8 o'clock at night, right? And I'm always really curious about emails. You get the time stamp, and
Mhm.
it's always fascinating to me how much people, we work on weekend. And I'm not saying I don't always too, but I have a slightly different work schedule where sometimes I also take time off on weekdays. And we're all conditioned, so that is powerful. Get curious with your teams. What is our expectations? Can we set boundaries on this? And
Mhm.
maybe you, Jenny, you're like, I like to work on a Saturday, so I like to send my emails on the Saturday. But it's very clear that if we don't have that expectation, I'm not going to respond until, whatever time. So that is, think of it team wise. I'm sure most people do think of things like common, hydrating, food, all that good stuff. I will say, try to focus on making sure the people in your care are doing those things, because then it'll force you to do it with them.
Oh, I love that.
Because if I'm like, okay, everyone, we're all taking our water, we're all taking our breath, we're all, whatever. Also, a big thing I think that is overlooked, and I'm all about breath and mindfulness and all those
Yes.
things, and I will mention that, but it is so common for people to skip meals, grab and go, sugary foods, that another cup of coffee. Often, though, one of the reasons our energy crashes is because of blood sugar. I'm a big advocate for this. So, making sure you start your day with like protein, healthy fat, making sure every meal has those things. You probably won't even need as much coffee if you have more regulated blood sugar. So, have some grab and go things. Your
Yeah.
favorite. I love these little mini gluten free protein cashew bar things from Target. Like, I don't remember what they're called, but anyhow, like, have your grab and go things. And I very much do believe that get yourself connected to some place of support in terms of someone who's going to help you build your awareness, help you regulate your nervous system. Love to work with you, all of you out there. It's interesting for me, I added mindfulness and breath work last. So for me, I had to start with doable doses. I had to start with done is better than perfect, setting some boundaries, giving myself compassion. I actually, before I did even any of that, the first thing I ever did when I was in a deep, dark state and I was like, what? How am I supposed to take care of myself? I got to this place because I didn't have time in the first place. And you wouldn't tell me I got to do that. Like, there's no time.
Right.
So the first thing that, I got told was, can you drink a glass of water first thing in the morning? So you don't get to 3 o'clock and you're parched because whatever. I was like, oh, I can do that. And then they were like, can you take 10 deep breaths before you get out of bed in the morning? Oh, I could do that. So doable doses. And then I kind of built up and got more steady, surrounding myself with support, people helping me kind of build my awareness,
Hmm.
circles of groups like I lead, and I did, therapy, all the good stuff. I then later added mindfulness and breath work, which I do believe it would have been amazing to start those earlier on. And I wasn't ready because I was like, oh, I don't have time for those things.
Right.
I don't think they're going to work. I tried here and there. They didn't work. Although breath work is one of those things that works usually on the first go. Mindfulness can take a little while to build up, but breath
Yeah.
work is usually like you're like, whoa, that first time. So if I were to do it over, I probably would have started breath work from the get go. But I had to kind of be sold on those things. I had to become
Hmm.
steady enough. So, but I would say try some of that out as well. Yeah, those are some starting places.
Well, and I know for myself, kind of similar to what you were sharing, I have like reminders on my phone where it just says
Mhm.
choose a
Yep.
strategy. Because I think sometimes we get stuck in, oh, the only strategy that we're supposed to be doing is, this meditation app or
Yep.
this one thing. And then for myself, I have a list of strategies,
Yep.
and some of them are if I had 10 minutes, and some of them are in I am spiraling. I am not going to be able to sit down for a 10-minute meditation because I can't even get to that spot. And
Totally.
there are things like stand up and walk around. Like, could you just walk outside? That's all you have to, and like that is the strategy.
Yep.
And so, like for myself, I had to have certain leveled of ones
Yep.
depending on how dysregulated, which seems opposite because you would think very dysregulated, I need a really big strategy.
Yep.
Sometimes not at the moment.
Yep.
It's too much to ask of my brain. I need something super simple to
Yep.
just break the spiral a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do love when we have people in our corner kind of making sure those things happen.
Mhm.
Hey, do you want to have this talk, but while we walk, right? Like a little walk and talk. So then you're getting outside, you're getting the walk, you're getting the movement. You're going to have to consult with that person anyhow.
Right.
Can we grab our phone and do it while we're walking? Obviously, there's confidentiality. Be aware of that, as we're walking and talking about kids, but
Yes.
nonetheless, so sometimes it is that. Sometimes it's, oh my gosh, I'm like going, when you get to that place, sometimes you're writing a report or an email or whatever, and your brain has totally just stopped, and you're like, I can't even think straight. I think I sat here for 5 minutes not writing anything.
Yes.
And clearly, we got to take a break. Sometimes I like to go find a classroom or go outside with kids because sometimes also for me one of the things that is a quick reset is just seeing a kid, having an interaction. So kind of whatever lights people up.
Right.
So yeah, there's such a array of strategies, right? Like that's why we all need an IWP to figure out what is our toolbox
Yes.
to figure out what works for us. Yeah.
I will say when I was at my elementary school, I had a preschool. on our campus. And so I had told the teacher, I said, sometimes I'm going to come in here. I'm not here to observe anyone. It just lightens my load to just hang out with preschool kids. And she was like, okay, come in anytime. She was like, can I ask you a question if you're in here? I'm like, yes, you can. But
Yeah.
that was just the simple, quick thing is just go hang out and watch preschoolers play. Like,
Yeah.
I'm doing okay.
Totally. And with preschoolers or kindergartners, you're probably going to get at least one hug. Not always, but a lot of the times for random or like, hi. And it's like your whole soul just kind of, okay, here we go. So, and then your brain turns back on. You can think again. So, and in doing that, that's what allows us to come back to our to-do list also
Right.
and see it with fresh eyes. Productivity isn't getting everything done on the list. It's being able to evaluate in real time what matters to get done, what can I take off my plate, because we put a lot of pressure ourselves to get all the things, and
Right.
sometimes that doesn't really, yep, cross that one off. So it's about being able to come from that place of a little bit more groundedness. So whatever works to do that, it's great. Yeah.
All right, one last tip that I'm going to have you share before we move forward with our questions. And I'm going to put you on the spot because I did not tell you about this ahead of time. So I don't know if you have it memorized, but I have definitely seen in your email signature, you have some language in
Oh.
there about like, I might not get back to you right away, or this might, I forgot the exact language, but I remember the first time I saw it and I was like, it's so lovely. It was written in such a beautiful way, but it really was honoring exactly what you're talking about here, which is boundaries. And
Mm-hmm.
I might not get back to you right away because I might have some other priorities. So, do you remember the language that you have? Are you
Uh,
pulling it up right now?
yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. Let's see if I can make my screen a little bigger so I can see it here. So, oops, now I made a screen too big. I'm sure she can edit that out. So it is about me as well, and though it's to communicate to other folks. So it says, if you receive this email during hours that are not designated for work, please take care of yourself and reply whenever is most nourishing to you.
I love that.
Yeah. And I always feel like if I need more urgent communication, I have the tools to get in touch with you as needed. And I love when other people take more time to respond. I feel like it gives me permission to do the same, that we're all human. I remember when email came out. Again, I'm dating myself
Oh, no, I
because
remember.
it
I
didn't
remember.
exist before at the start of my career. And there was phones and you could only get to your voicemail when you came to work and all these beautiful things. It created more automatic boundaries. And
Right.
now we don't have that, yet our need to honor our humanity still exists. And
Right.
so when we have a culture where this becomes the norm, right, where we get to respond when we need to, it's great. And you also have to, somebody told me once, if you reply right away to emails, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get another email back that you
Exactly.
have to reply to. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is one of the reasons my inbox is so full, because I'm prompt to reply. So then I think to myself now, does this require me to reply right away? Or if I do want to reply, because I want it off my mental load, I will reply, but I will use that beautiful schedule send for 2 days from now because it's not urgent or whatever it is. And then it's off my plate and no reply is coming anytime soon.
Exactly.
So I love that. Yeah.
Well, and I love how that little statement at the end of your emails is really about the other person, but it tells that other person about you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it just sets the stage, which I think is so very lovely. So thank you for sharing that with everyone.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, reflecting back on your first year as a school psychologist, I always love to share some suggestions. What advice would you give to someone who's starting their journey in this field?
I would say that it's not so much about your skill level or how much you know. It is about your willingness to grow and learn and surround yourself with support, and about the relationships you can build through that ongoing learning and growth and willingness to engage in that beginner mindset. I think when we're new at something, I'll speak about myself. When I'm new at something, sometimes I want to look really competent. I want
Yeah.
to look a certain way. And so then the self-talk becomes, oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't know that. Or, oh, let's pretend we know this so that they don't think I don't know.
Yes.
Whereas when we can honor the unknowns
Hmm.
within ourselves, again, well, first of all, we're modeling a growth mindset, and it's a beautiful invitation for all of us to do that. Because I think sometimes in education, people both want to pretend like they look like they have a certain level of competence that maybe they don't have yet, and that's okay.
Right.
Or we can get very stuck in our ways because we kind of shift into, I'm supposed to know it all, even as veterans in the
Right.
field too. And I think there's a lot of power in putting our ego to the side and just being like, I need support always. I need to grow. I need to learn. Just Thursday, somebody called me up and asked me some question about an amendment. I was like, I have no idea. I said, I don't never had to do that part. I don't know. I do know who I could go ask for you though. And
Exactly.
that I think is key, is surrounding yourself with those relationships, and in that kindness with yourself and others, people realize it's also okay for them to acknowledge when they need help and support, because
Hmm.
sometimes that's the social emotional work, being able to create that trust and safety in a relationship where a teacher can say, because you know, so often I do hear psychs and others saying like, well, they got the training, they should know that. Well, sometimes that happens because our teachers we support also feel this, like they're
Right.
supposed to know it all. Whereas if we make it a culture again of that growth mindset and openness to learn and grow and get support and say, I don't know this, we open up more possibilities for people actually growing and shifting in the ways we want.
Right. I will say just the other day, someone came up to me, was asking me some follow-up questions, and I did a little bit of nodding of like, that sounds kind of sort of familiar. But the minute they walked away, I immediately wrote down like three things that I'm like, I need to go follow up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
these are not questions I knew the answers right off the
Mm-hmm.
top of my head. I knew a little bit about it, but I was like, all right, we're going to grow and learn. I definitely do not know everything about this topic. And I'm so glad someone asked me privately and not in front of the whole group.
Yeah. Yeah. I will add one thing for first years: figure out what you love and advocate for that in your role. I have done a lot of that throughout my career, and
Yeah.
it's been great. So people like, how did you get that job where you did this? I rolled into my internship and said, hey, I'm being trained in X, Y, and Z, and I think it would be really powerful. Can I try that? And they said, okay,
Right.
sure. And so then it became something. The next year I said, hey, can we create a job where this is what I do? Because they enjoyed what I had done in my internship year. So I think we get scared that we're supposed to do it a certain way. And it might be like planting a seed for 2 years from now, but like
Right.
I would love if in a, you know, when we can create staffing situation for, if we shifted the amount of staffing here, I think the ratio should be this, or whatever it is, plant those seeds and speak up in those ways.
I love that. Well, to finish up our conversation today, this podcast is called The Prepared School Psych. When you think of that term prepared, what do you do to help yourself feel more prepared in all of the many roles you have?
I am constantly learning and growing, I think, is the piece. I love to learn. Obviously, my business is called Constant Love and Learning. And so that is one big piece. Like preparedness comes from just always being open to the new learning that we can develop. And I would say prepared, a piece of that is about regulating your nervous system, because I think no matter, again, how much cognitive knowledge you have of something or skills you've developed, I can go into any interaction, and to really be prepared for those interactions, to be able to tap into the knowledge, wisdom, skills I have, it requires me to be regulated. And so I think that is a piece. So whatever you need to do to honor your nervous system's needs, that is beautiful, because then we tap into our infinite capacity for problem solving. And as a school psychologist, I would say that is like a vital piece of our role, because there's literally no 2 days that are alike for me in my
Yeah.
entire career. And so
Yeah.
every day there is a new situation, a new potential problem to solve. And that comes from that willingness to learn and grow, to find
Mhm.
those answers, and to be regulated enough to be able to tap into that creative, thinking. So those would be the pieces I would say to help you be prepared.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for everything that you do for not only your students and the families at your schools, but for all of the work you do to help support educators everywhere. And for anyone who's interested in learning more about the work that you do, we'll make sure to put your link in the show notes. So if anyone is interested, thank you so much for being here today, Katie.
Thank you, Jenny. I love everything you do. I follow you. I learn from you. I'm so grateful that you've created this podcast and that I had the opportunity to be on it.
Thank you so much. All right. We'll see everyone next time. Bye, everyone.